Hello and welcome to the Let That Shift Go podcast. I'm Noel.
And I'm Lena.
And this is where we talk about the good, the bad, and all the shift in between.
We'll just talk mad shift.
Let's get into it. Well, all right. This is part 2 of Shifty Relationships with Lena and Armando. And let's get into this second arc of Soulmates. And really, we talked the last episode about your rolemates and kind of how that whole thing went down. Mm-hmm. And now where we ended was really right when you guys started to tap into the soulmate section and really coming back together. And so could you give me, Lena, why don't you talk a little bit about that shift after you guys decided to move back in with one another and how that kind of felt different for each other?
I think one of the big difference is that we actually felt like two individual people, right? So having grown up together and having been, raising a family and going through all that as rolemates, we kind of just were this enmeshed mechanism,
mm-hmm.
A force, and never quite actually being able to be an individual person for each of us, him or me, because we were so intertwined.
Yeah.
And so focused on building, and so everything was dependent on each other. And so our coming back together after separation for so long really felt like we had time in that 2.5 years to kind of see who we were as individuals without the other person.
Even financially, you guys were able to gain some financial independence and
totally
just moving through things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think neither of us had ever had the experience of being a single adult.
No, because you guys have been together since you were 13 and 16. Yeah.
Yeah. We'd never had relationships with anyone else. We'd never got to try out our personalities.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
With ourselves without the other person or with anyone else. And so you learn so much about yourself through relationship with, different people or with each other. But we had been just so intertwined that there was not a lot of growth for us as individuals. And not a lot of room for one or the other to even pursue what our individual interests were. We didn't have individual interests.
Yeah.
Period. We did not.
What did you think you took away from that time apart? What was the number one thing that you feel you took away from that experience of being on your own?
I think there was a tremendous amount of confidence in who I was as a person. And the ability to really hear my own voice.
Yeah.
And what was that voice saying? And, just being able to learn to trust myself and being able to know that I was capable, because a lot in the relationship, I never felt that. I felt that I was always dependent, that I was not capable of, supporting myself or having an opinion that mattered, that could, it was not the experience I had or had an opportunity to have. And probably Armando didn't get to have, and so that was something that was really valuable for me in order to grow as a woman.
How about you, Mondo? What was the biggest thing you took away from that time, the 2.5 years that you guys were separated and you come back into it? Was there a moment or a thought that was like, I'm going to do this different? I learned this while I was away from Lena, and now this is what I learned, and this is what I'm going to do different. What was that for you?
What I learned the most was really profound for me was that I was responsible for my own happiness. Like I couldn't truly be happy unless I was happy with myself. And a lot of it was spending time alone, realizing that I really actually like spending time alone. So I would read a lot of books. I would take a lot of walks with my dog. And so I realized that you
didn't want to, was it difficult to kind of process the emotions at all? Because you were at a different point in healing. Like Lena was actually at a self-discovery at that point, but I don't know that you were really doing a lot of self-dive at that particular moment.
No, I wasn't.
Yeah.
No, not at that particular time.
Yeah.
I knew that my happiness didn't evolve around Lena anymore. I realized that I was comfortable being with myself.
Yeah.
But the other thing is,
It's like you were breaking down all your old beliefs
yes,
about who you thought you were, what you thought you needed, and having all of those things removed gave, I don't know, in my view, watching it was giving him a chance to really see what was actually there.
Yeah, because you never really been in a house without the kids in the house and without a whole bunch of stuff going on when you came home from work. And now I'm hearing you saying that one of the most, their favorite pastimes was walking your dog.
Yeah,
So
being alone.
being alone and realizing that you could be. So that's pretty profound. And knowing that the source of your happiness couldn't revolve around Lena or the kids.
oh yeah, absolutely. You're talking to a guy that would not feel comfortable even eating lunch at a place by myself, even if I was, driving around work. But the other thing too that I want to emphasize in the 2.5 years was that I also put a lot of effort into the business. I had just, I was letting the business grow, and it was all on me. And there was no more advice or talking through with Lena. It was basically all on me. And so, coming back into this relationship, we both were self-sufficient, and there was a lot of talks in that. I was really interested in the things that she would say about her work, and because it was really interesting stuff. And then she was really interested in the business side of what I was doing, and so we really were talking like two professionals, and best friends. We were like just both couldn't wait to talk to each other about our daily lives, which was before it was during the Wholemates was like, I'm home tired. What do you want? Oh, and it was very superficial. It was just basically her talking about what the kids did or what they didn't do. And I was talking about how tired I was and how much I'm not appreciated. And so it was a whole different dynamics.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is you really, the difference maybe is that you were finding ways to connect on a deeper level, and really,
we had more content.
Yeah. You did have more content because then you were connecting with an individual heart as opposed to like an enmeshed heart that you guys previously had in that role relationship. So this one sounds like you're bringing two separate hearts back together and then trying to find ways to join them back together, join your hearts emotionally.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We definitely had a lot more content. We definitely were coming back in as individuals, and really offering ourselves in such a different way.
I'm sure there were still hiccups and hurdles of getting back, right? I mean,
but there was a lot of mutual respect. It's like I felt like I had gained his respect, and I was no longer one of the submissives. And there was a different way that I feel like he viewed me, and there was a different way that I viewed him.
Because he was hearing you?
He was hearing me. Yeah. And I think all the things that, and I don't want to speak for him, but that, like that he feared, oh, you're going to go do this. You're going to go do that. You're going to, and it was like, I didn't do any of the things that you were afraid of. Like, and I'm still here. I'm still me. And so it just kind of debunked some of that. And then, there was a different respect for me outside of who you thought I was.
Yeah.
And really being able to see who I actually am, and me being able to see who he is outside of just the role of a father, the role of a husband, the role of a provider. Like, who are you as a man? What are the things that you're actually interested in that you got to go participate in and cultivate on your own, without me having to plan everything or, do all that. And so we definitely had more content. It was a lot more of an interesting relationship, I think, for both of us. And then you couple that with somebody who has all of your history. He has all of my history. Like when I go to the doctor, I'm like, how many surgeries have I had? I have to look at him.
Yeah.
Because he's like, oh, this many, or, you've done this or what. And we hold that for each other. So to be able to have that with this person and also have like, your best friend who really knows you and supports you. And I think that we were a lot more supportive of each other as individuals. And that was a really important part of actually moving into that soulmate part of our relationship. It's like, well, who are you as a soul?
Yeah.
Let's bring that together, but we're not going to just go into roles.
Yeah.
We're going to fully support each other's mission, as individuals, whatever that is, because that's important. And that will be the best thing we can do for our relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even when, we would have our daily conversations after we come home from work. And in the past, like in the past, I vividly remember Oprah, and then she came home and she had this book called Eckhart Tolle, something,
The New Earth,
and I thought that book was
Power of Now.
Yeah, it was like I thought that was a book was evil. And,
Power of
and I
Now.
even, I tried reading it back then too. I go, I don't get it. What is this? It's self, what ego, and so, but fast forwarding it, 2.5 years, we would sit there, eating dinner, and she'd talk about all these books, and I remember, her mentioning a few books. I'm like, and I was really fascinated by it. I was actually like, oh, it just changed the way I saw everything, and so it kind of jarred me into reading some of the same books that she was reading. And I would go on my own and read some different books, and I would come back and I go, oh my gosh, you got to read this book, Lena. It's so good. It's fiction. It's, Celestine Prophecy. Oh, I read that book 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I found myself reading these books that she never told me to read. I would just find them on my own. And, that kind of opened up a lot. And so our conversations were really powerful, really in depth. And we really loved to be around each other with that, and so it just changed. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exponentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so fun to be able, you should hear our conversations are so weird now.
Well, now.
Yeah. I mean, like we talk about, the same things and we can really kind of bounce off each other. And sometimes he'll look at me and he'll say, this must have been so hard for you when you had read all that, or you were thinking all this stuff. And being with me then, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's.
Yeah. How was that that's one of the things that comes up a lot is when a couple or two people in a relationship aren't shifting at the same time. And it almost never happens at the same time.
No.
Right?
No.
And you had shifted much earlier and came to some awareness. And Armando, by what you were saying earlier, is just even reading the books initially, you were like, I don't get this. This guy's evil. What are you doing?
Yeah.
But later you read it and you thought, man, yeah, there's something here. What is that for you? How did that?
You mean like how was it back then? Like
yeah,
when we were
like how
two different places.
Yeah, being in two different places. How was it experiencing Mondo not being into the books at first, but gradually getting into his own things, and you going, oh, babe, you got to read this book. And then I read it 10 years ago. I mean, like he said, there's got to be something, but I'm really interested in your perspective on that side of the coin.
I think that, it was really hard because if if you start getting into a lot of this more self-awareness and really kind of figuring things out in a way that just expands your view of the world, and you're with someone who thinks that that's crazy and they're praying over your head so the demons will leave you, like that's not easy, But at least at that point, I wasn't mad. I was just like, wow, that must be really hard. And I understood, but it didn't make it any easier. And, to say at that time that, well, we could have just stayed together and we would have figured it out. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I think it was pretty extreme. And I at that point felt like I'm going to have to not be me in order to be here. Yeah. Because at that time, he was not willing. And I think that that's the most important element in a relationship where one person is shifting into another state of awareness and one's not, is that, you don't have to do it at the same time, right? It's not, if just because they don't believe the same things you believe at that time doesn't mean that the relationship's over. But there has to be an openness or a willingness for, maybe a little bit more depth,
for the work to be done. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of it is your own going into your own shadows, really kind of figuring out who you are. And if both people are willing to do that on any level, then I think that it's possible. But, that was the thing.
Or if only one person is shifting and the other is not, as long as the other partner that's not shifting is okay with letting the other partner go and shift and try and figure it out. Our experience was I was fighting you tooth and nail. I mean, I was actually hindering you. So
when you were in Rolemates.
So now in the work that we do, Lena and I do here at Serenity Cove, we do find that. We do find a lot of ladies that come and they say, oh, yeah, my husband's letting me do this. And, he's not into this. But at the very least, they're allowing them to go and experience this. And for them, it's not where they're at, but at least they're not fighting them. And so I think that these women that come, if their husbands were fighting them or not allowing them to come,
or men that come,
or men,
Yeah.
it goes both ways. Then there is a problem. So I think that for us, we needed to separate and to at least I needed to separate from Lena as well, so I could go on my own path and grow, and then also Lena allow her to grow and do the things that she wants to do or needed to do.
When you guys were back together and you were back and working on the soul mates part of it, I see that as, from my perspective, it was you had a willingness at that point, and that was the difference between jumping out of role into soul. It, really, from my perspective, outside in watching, your willingness to kind of start to see things and start to be a little bit more seemed like that's where the soulmates started to kind of come together.
Yeah.
And even though Lena was 10 years ahead on whatever she was reading, it didn't mean that you couldn't come along or you were going to be at the same pace, but eventually you were going to work and come to a certain level.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. And she was very graceful. I mean, she, aside from her saying, I read that book 10 years ago, she was very patient with me. It was almost like, he's starting to get it. And it's one of those things where, at least for me, it has to be something that I have to come up with. Nobody can tell me, what it is or what I need. I have to be able to experience it on my own. It's just like a trust issue probably, but it's, for me to be able to find that on my own. And
yeah, because it's not none of this is something you can push on people.
No, but I think it had to be intimidating for Armando from the other perspective, because sometimes, at least for me, when I would do all this self-help and reading and all that, sometimes I would weaponize my knowledge. And that's where I failed, because it really kept my relationship stuck, because I was going out and learning all this stuff. And then it was really difficult for Ellen or my wife to even, I think she just felt totally intimidated because I'm just speaking all this knowledge.
Yeah, there's
and
definitely.
then you feel like, I don't even know what the hell he's talking about. So I wonder with you, Armando, the same thing, if like with Lena, that part of seeing her, already been there, done that kind of Mountain Dew thing, she's already done it all. Was it ever a part where it made you feel like not keep trying, or was it just more motivation to keep, what? She's got something here, or I'm going to keep just trying to grow.
Are you saying when we were separated?
No, when you were back together.
Oh, we were back together. It was a source of inspiration. It was like, I knew from being on my own that whatever I was comfortable with doing, I was going to do, and whatever I wasn't comfortable with, I wouldn't do. And Lena respected that, and so I would be there as like an observer and watcher. So there's lots of times where I was hesitant on doing certain things in certain modalities, but she would do it. But eventually, it goes to, it has to be my decision. It has to be, it's more of like, I don't know if it's just
I'm just the guinea pig.
Yeah, exactly. And
somebody's got to go first.
Yeah, somebody's got to go first.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Well, that's the yin and the yang of the relationships, though. And both me and Lena are the people who jump first at most things.
Yeah.
And even though we're siblings, but in our relationships, we're the same.
Yeah.
Where we're usually the first to go jump off and do something or try something.
Yeah. I can't suggest anything I don't believe in.
Yeah.
So, and I think to your, to speak to Armando, like with us coming back into the relationship as, more towards that soulmate, you're right. There was definitely like an openness, to allow me to seek and to study and to like move into different things that I'm always interested in. My mind is always changing and it's always going. And instead of that being a bad thing, it became something that he knew, and he just, kind of celebrated.
And supported your differences.
Yeah,
And
celebrated
your
it, yeah.
differences. Yeah.
That's
And
a good word,
so-
celebrated. 'Cause
Yeah,
it really
I felt
was.
celebrated. I felt like the way I was celebrated. It wasn't like you're too much.
Yeah.
Which before I was told I was too much.
Yeah. You were trying to shrink.
Yeah. And that was like a big, like, I'm too much. I'm too much for anybody.
Yeah.
You know, and I realized, like, I know I'm not too much. And actually, when we got back together, it was not like that. It was like, I celebrate who you are, and I celebrate the things that you are interested in, because I trust you to know enough about what you're interested in.
Yeah.
And that, you know, that you have sense and that you can do it because you
Yeah.
did it without me.
Yeah, you were talking to a guy that, you know, in the past, based on my beliefs, even, I thought even yoga was not something I would do, just based,
Yeah.
you know, based on my own beliefs. And so, you know, you fast forwarded to when we got back together, you know, she would go, hey, I'm going to go to this yoga class, and it's not only going to be yoga, it's going to be like at 105 degrees for an hour and a half.
Oh, yeah. That hot yoga,
And so,
Bikram, whatever that is.
actually,
Yeah.
that's and that's what started for me as far as doing something that was very uncomfortable. But again, I celebrated Lena. I saw how she felt afterwards, and during that time, I still struggled with some serious anxiety. So that still kind of stayed with me even through that time. Yeah. So, you know, again, did it and felt fantastic. And then we ended up doing it. Like, you know, we were members we would go to what? Three times a week. And,
Yeah.
And so
Push yourself into uncomfortable places and see what's there.
Well, you guys are, I think in that soulmate part, you're really doing your own healing individually. And Lena, you'd been doing it for a while. Armando was finding his way by your invitation and leading by some example. And of course, his path was even still a little bit different than yours. But yeah, I think that's the most important part of the soulmates is really just trying to find that healing so you can be more complete individuals.
Yeah.
And bring in your whole selves.
Yeah, you have to do your own work. Like, I had to do my own work. Armando had to do his own work, you know, on his own. And then we can come together and support each other through continuing that path. And I think that's really more of where we're at.
Yeah, that's where the soulmates really, I think, supporting each other, helping each other to succeed and find and achieve each one's goals and wants, needs.
Yeah, to become more of who they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, more innately. You know, that's really kind of supporting that whole person.
Yeah.
And it's definitely been a process, and when we've learned, and now it's become a lot more natural, and that has become, I would say, it's become pretty effortless.
Well, now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think
now.
But I think there's the next step after a soulmates is wholemates, right? And that's just when couples, you know, seek to join together to achieve goals and serve together. Yeah. And I think really that's where, you know, since you guys created Serenity Cove, from my perspective, I really saw that is where you guys during that soulmate phase were healing and doing all those things. You actually renewed your vows because you never actually got divorced, but that was a wonderful moment for the family to have you guys back together.
Yeah.
And you guys started to work into where the wholemates were and really finding a purpose together and building that. And Serenity Cove has become that. So talk a little bit about that part of the relationship and phase.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the renewing our vows, because afterwards, you know, we never had a wedding. So, you know, the renewing our vows was actually like
the real wedding.
The real wedding. And so we actually had a honeymoon. So we went to Aruba. And in Aruba, you know, we did all the things, you know, went to the beach and did all the excursions. But she, of course, Lena, being Lena, decides, I think we want to let's go do a yoga class. I'm like, all right, let's do it. So we go, and it turns out that the class was canceled because they had a guest that was going to be there. And she was going to do her own modality, and it was called sound bath. And at the time, I didn't know what that was. And so I was like, And so I asked Lena, what's a sound bath? Oh, you just lie down and you hear sound. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is even better than yoga. I don't have to,
you don't have to do anything?
I just lay here. Shoot, I hit the lotto.
All right.
And so, you know, so she did it, and she didn't use any crystal bowls. She used these big, long, like organ pipe looking things, and she was banging them and chanting. And I, for the first time, went into a very deep trance where I actually saw a lot of color with my eyes closed, and that was really interesting. And it was, it was very. I would say my anxiety started kicking in, but I think it was the first time that I actually started realizing I have anxiety, but then it would go away. And then, after the class, fast forward after the class, I was like, oh, fantastic. It was great. I saw this, and Lena's like, didn't you see that? I'm like, no, I didn't see any color. So I realized that my experience wasn't something that everybody experienced. So I'll let Lena finish it from there. So we leave there.
Oh yeah. And then we leave there after the sound bath. That was amazing, right? Not really realizing like, oh, that was cool. In fact,
like 30 minutes or an hour?
I hadn't even had a sound bath before. It was like an hour.
Okay.
Probably an hour and 10 minutes. No, I'd never had a sound bath before.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
And we were both a little bit changed after that. And Mondo, he could like, he was, he woke up in the middle of the night. He's like, I can hear the Wi-Fi. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, I can hear like the Wi-Fi. I can hear
white noise,
electrical signals. And I'm like, I don't hear that. And he's like, you need to call this lady and you need to tell her to fix whatever she did because something is different. And I don't know what this is.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, I don't know either. But like after that, I couldn't eat meat for 6 months.
Yeah,
I couldn't eat anything that had ever lived because I could feel like the consciousness of the animal. And I was like bean and cheese burritos for 6 months. But, anyway, I think that was the first crack. Like one of the cracks into Armando was like, what was that? How could I be affected by sound?
And how uncomfortable it made me feel. So it was something that I had no control over. So it was teaching me.
Yeah, you were pretty closed off at that point.
Yeah. I mean, he was willing to let me explore and he'd be interested, and be like, okay, well, I'll go with you.
Yeah.
But for him, it was like, wait, what is this? What is that? So, that kind of led him into more of a seeking mindset.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I didn't have to push anything. He was trying to figure out what happened to his hearing, which I think it was more like an ascension symptom, but that's when he, started to kind of go down this path of like, well, what is it about frequency and sound? And so that kind of started us on the path. And so by that time, we were back together. We're living, in our home and in Temecula, in like a, little suburb. And we decided we were going to move as an investment and come back to our house. And for some reason that just opened us up to looking. And that's when Serenity Cove came into our awareness.
Yeah.
Nothing else would work out that we were bidding on homes. And this was at a time when bidding on homes was not a thing.
Yeah.
And so we found this place and came to see it. And immediately, I came onto the property. He had found it first. And he's like, I want you to see this place. And I'm like, tell me about it. He's like, it's 5 acres. I'm like, well, you don't even like the yard work. So how are we supposed to live on 5 acres? Like, I can't do that. I can't do all the yard work. And he's like, no, just come see it. And I was really tired. I was exhausted after a 24-hour shift because I was working as in flight. And as soon as I came on the property, I'm like, oh my God, we could live here. And he's like, yeah. And just started to cry, and I didn't even want to see the house. Like I just said, just buy it.
Make an offer.
He's like, do you want to see the house? I'm like, no, there's nothing in there that's going to impress me.
Yeah.
But this land, I could camp here and we could be happy. And we knew immediately like this place would need to be shared.
Yeah.
Because it was so peaceful and it just felt like an exhale, coming here. So the land is it's very beautiful and it's healed us.
Yeah.
So, us being here, it's been 5 years and it's evolved into something much greater, just a place of healing for other people and a place that is healed.
And a place where you guys, more importantly, serve together.
Yes, and this has become our Wholemates mission.
Yeah, and you guys have thrown like couples retreats and women's retreats, men's circles.
Yes,
all those things are now happening here because you guys are sharing, the purpose of serving other people.
Yeah.
Because you guys have done your own works to heal each other, and now you're finding purpose together. So that's what I really believe. When I heard this, this Wholemates thing, whichever, most people have heard of Soulmates, but the Wholemates part I'd never really, even considered.
Yeah.
And now really, seeing you two kind of live that part of it is pretty inspiring.
Yeah.
At least from this perspective,
It's possible. I'll tell you, when you think, people don't change, I would say that's not true. People can change. It's their perspective that needs to shift.
Yeah.
They can shift. They don't necessarily need to change. They can shift.
Yeah.
And I was not at all ever under the impression that Mondo could change or shift. Or I'm sure he didn't maybe feel that way about me. But I think through the work that we've done, we know that it's possible. And I think all the things that we create here are the things that we would have needed 15 years ago.
Yeah.
To help us.
Yeah.
And so when we do couples, retreats or Women's Day or Men's Circle, it's because it's the thing that probably would have helped us back then to just become a little bit more self-aware, a little bit more healthy, mentally, and a place to just kind of open up and find yourself, like just a path back to yourself.
Yeah. And that's really the purpose.
That's it. That's the purpose. That's our Wholmate vision.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I got to say, guys, like it's pretty vulnerable sharing such a deep story, and there was a lot of ups and downs, and listening to the arc of that, and where you guys had broken up and not together, and then coming together to here we are, all three of us, recording a podcast based on this stuff is pretty amazing, and I really appreciate being a part of this, because that's really my vision and what I would like to do, just because I'm so inspired by you, and you guys give me a place to have a voice and all those things. So watching you two in Wholemates is probably the most amazing thing. So,
well, thank you.
I appreciate you.
Noelle was our first graduate of our advanced awareness training program here at Serenity Cove.
The Red Bull edition. So just if anybody has thoughts or questions on, more of what's going on here, visit the website, serenitycove.com, listen to more of the podcast, and maybe sign up to come to one of these men's circles or, the couples retreats, and find a path to your own healing.
Yeah.
All right. That's been another episode of Let That Shift Go podcast. I'm Noelle.
And I'm Lena. Let us know what your questions are, and we'd love to use them on a future episode. Or check us out on Insta at Let That Shift Go, or visit our website, serenitycovetemecula.com.